All right, welcome to the official first episode of the Where Did I Start podcast. I'm your host, Jake Henry, and this is Chase Kozlowski, founder and CEO of Sweet Rides, a transportation service that is looking to kind of shake up the industry. So we know our Ubers, and for the people who are avid in the community, they've heard about potentially Joker, but Chase has a new spin on the rideshare technology that we're going to talk about today, break down, and Chase, we're super happy to have you on today, and I'm excited to get into it. So my first question for you today is kind of a little bit of the background. So if you want to give a little bit of a breakdown of what Sweet Ride is and
Sure.
what you're looking to do with it, and then we can kind of go from there.
Well, thank you for having me on your first episode. This is super exciting for you and hopefully for, the future of the podcast. I'm super pumped. So Sweet Ride, I guess simply put, we like to say that we're like Uber, but we're all electric and we're free. So the first question is usually, well, how do you make that happen? How is that possible? And again, simply put, we run ads. So, the light bulb moment is really, for a lot of people, is, well, okay, well, how does YouTube make money? Or why is YouTube worth almost $1 trillion, or Facebook? Again, it's because they run ads. So, we found that there's a unique opportunity with, the kind of the history of, startups like Uber and Lyft to do things differently. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. So I see. So I guess my question off of that is like, I really like the idea of the ad revenue generation and how you guys are going about it. But how do you do the recruitment of bringing people on? Because I remember I did my first Sweet Ride a couple of weeks back, and I got an ad for Bronze Bunny. That was the first one. So I kind of if you want to go into how that works.
So thank you for trying it. Thank you for using it. I hope
Sure
hope the ride went well. But yeah, so a big part of the model, of course, is allowing advertisers, a strong ROI on, how they're going to generate revenue for themselves. Without getting too, down the rabbit hole here, there's a lot of noise in the ad space. There's digital advertising, there's, physical billboards, there's all kinds. We're trying to create something that's totally different. So your standard out-of-home advertising, they call that OOH or DOOH for your digital out-of-home advertising. We're looking to work with companies that want to be differentiated. So companies that don't have a monopoly on industry, which most don't. If you're competing, I think Sweet Ride could be for you. So whether that's wrapping our cars or pushing ads through the digital platform on the app, that's the sweet spot. So Bronze Bunny, they're a salon locally. They're a national chain, and they were very gracious to work with us to kind of roll this out as a pilot or really a beta. And they've been seeing an increase in business since we send them reports, so they can see how many hits and clicks they get through the app.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really interesting, and I feel like we did a full-on deep dive right away into Sweet Ride, and I wanna try and backtrack a little bit. Obviously, we'll come back to it and get more into it, but I kind of want to see from an entrepreneurial perspective. Have you always been an entrepreneurial person, or do you think it's something you've kind of grown and adapted to? Was your family entrepreneurial? I want to get a general idea for the audience if this is something that you were born into, grew into yourself, or something you thought was just kind of always in you.
Yeah, so I don't really come from necessarily an entrepreneurial background. My family, pretty normal folks. Just typical middle class family, normal jobs. I think potentially a lot of my kind of creativity or that entrepreneurial side comes from growing up playing in bands and playing music, but also having interest in business. So kind of getting to flex both of those muscles, I think, is how I kind of came to be this way, I guess. I was in a touring rock band for a few years and got to see some of the world, and
That's interesting.
get to have a lot of different experiences that people typically don't have in their early 20s, and I think it just kind of opens you up to the possibilities of what can be done.
Yeah, that's a really cool experience. How you kind of connected the fact that you were in a band to be your first kind of entrepreneurial venture. The first time you're differentiating yourself from the rest of the pack, which is a really cool connection. So going off the idea of like being an entrepreneur, which I kind of want to tie into what we want to transition back into is Sweet Ride. Like, from your perspective, what hardships have you seen so far? Like, what's been the most difficult part of the journey of creating Sweet Ride? And as somebody who's trying to break into the entrepreneurial space and doesn't know necessarily where to start, what do you think would be the best piece of advice for somebody trying to take the jump from the idea to actually going for it?
I think the hardest part, in starting Sweet Ride and even getting to the place we are now, which is we're still a very small company, but we have an incredibly dedicated team. I think probably the hardest part for any young company is to find very mission-driven people. But once you have them, I feel, almost invincible. When you know that there really isn't a weakest link. And not every startup is for everybody and vice versa. That's not mutually exclusive. But, I can honestly say we have about a 15-person team now, every single one is as solid as I am. I mean, it's humbling. We're super appreciative, but it's that's the hardest part, I think, is, organically building a really strong foundational team. Yeah, that's the biggest thing for us.
I like how you really connected it with your team all kind of sharing the same goals and the same vision. Because I feel like if you're trying to take a company to the next level, whether it be just the idea to actually the creation of the company, I think it's really important that every single person individually has the same goals, same ideas, and not necessarily the same personalities. But yeah, I think it's really pivotal to that. So kind of coming back now to Sweet Ride, I wanted to ask, from the transportation perspective, I can put it on the screen and show you guys what the cars look like, but there seems to be a certain look that each car has. Did you want to kind of dive into how that process works and
Sure.
what your plan is with that?
Yeah, so the current cars that we run 2 cars. We cover Hershey and Harrisburg, which is not an incredibly small market, but that's that's kind of our operating geography at the moment. So with those 2 cars, we're able to accommodate our current capacity, which is certainly not the majority of the market share for rideshare, but that's kind of by our design right now. With that being said, those cars are, one of them has the Sweet Ride kind of livery, if you will. That's like our branding car that is meant to, build our awareness. And then we have our Bronze Bunny ad car. So we've kind of coined the term hero for our advertising partners because they're effectively the ones making this free for the users, right? So when a user downloads the app and they say, well, like, what's the catch? Why is this free? Well, it's because Bronze Bunny paid for this to allow you a free ride.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the style for Sweet Ride is also different than the traditional style of Uber, where it's not the individual owns the car. There's a certain set of cars that are used that are owned by the company, right?
Sure. So the idea is, we have a small fleet. We're building onto that fleet now, but they are company owned. So, what's we think is pretty cool is that the pilots, that's what we call our drivers, you don't have to drive your own car. So on top of the fact that they're paid hourly versus, dollar per mile, or, if you're not doing rides, you're not getting paid. All of our pilots are paid by the hour. So, it's consistent income. You know that, you're going to make money this week or this month. On top of that, you're not driving your own car. So the wear and tear, oil changes, tires, brakes, none of that is an issue with us because you're driving one of our vehicles and they're Teslas, which Teslas are pretty cool. I mean, you may love or hate them, but they're a fun driving experience, and passengers seem to really like them too.
I can definitely agree on that one. At least the younger generation definitely loves being able to associate with Teslas. Everybody wants a Tesla. Everybody wants to be in a Tesla. They're kind of the staple car, I would say, of Gen Z. It's really interesting that you went with that model too, because it's very unique from what we thought of as the traditional business model with Uber. So I guess my question off of that is, what made you think of going this way as opposed to what their system was? Was it something inside of you? Was it someone from your advisory board, or who kind of steered you in this direction?
So I'll take it back kind of to the beginning, if I could, to the inception of the company. In the early days of COVID, that's kind of when the initial idea came about, which was, we're all from Hershey. let's make a service that, and this idea stemmed just before COVID hit. It was basically, hey, we have all these awesome restaurants. Let's make a circuit, and let's have electric cars run a circuit from restaurant to restaurant where people can jump on and you can get around town. This will drive business to the local restaurants. We thought this was a good idea. When COVID happened, that obviously was not an option. Mm-hmm. Nobody was looking for experimental ways of driving new business. Things were, starting to close down. Effectively then completely shut down. There was a little period of time there, of course, where we were having these conversations. We weren't getting very far, but we did have the cars. So we're saying to ourselves, what do we do with these cars, these Teslas that we bought? We need to do something. Restaurants, again, completely closed, and the one that we're sitting in now, Englewood, had just opened. A lot of restaurants were relying on food delivery, which is another leg of big rideshare companies like Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, those kinds. But they were charging exorbitant fees.
I can agree with that one too, yeah.
If you've used it, yeah. They were 20 to 40%, which is basically a restaurant's margin. So we said, okay, we have the cars. Let's jump in the cars and do food delivery. So we partnered with these restaurants. We went out and we drove for weeks. My partner and I, we just delivered food. We didn't charge anything. And we partnered with a hero at the time, which was a large credit union called Members First. And we said, what product do you want to promote? So they paid us for the advertising by we would put rate sheets in the food delivery bag. At that time, it was home equity loans. So that was kind of the start to, okay, wait, I think we might have something where we can pay for the operating expenditures of the service by way of advertising. That was the first moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's been a really cool transition seeing, especially how you said it started right before COVID, where you guys weren't able to do anything, and then coming out of COVID where it's like, okay, we see where we're going, we see the market. And I think the biggest thing is the customer segmentation and just testing to see what works, because that gave you the idea of going out and being like, hey, we can do more than just delivering food. We can move people around. We can bring business to community, like local communities, you said. Yeah. And I think it's really cool what you're doing too. Kind of, it almost seems like you're doing it to give back to the people, almost in the sense of like you have your system's like the taxi cab, which Uber was supposed to be a way to kind of shift that and bring it back to the people, but then it ended up being more expensive than the taxi cab. Right. You have your hotels, which were the place to stay, and then you had Airbnb come out, which is like, oh, here's an accommodation where I can go to someone's house and it's cheaper. But then Airbnb ended up being more expensive. But exactly. with this sound model, it seems like you're giving the luxury of the freedom to the people, able to do what they want, able to kind of have the power to kind of be able to go and
it's like a reorganization of equity in the structure, because sure, things have been done a certain way for a while. It doesn't mean that they're doing it right. We wouldn't be too bold to say that we know that we're doing it right, but we know that we should probably, take a shot at doing it differently. So, as it all relates to the advertising and, kind of what your footprint is worth online, I mean, say if you use Google, it's a search engine. I mean, they're a huge, incredibly complex company. We know that, right? But when you use Google, do you know how much worth that you're actually is on the table every time you use it? They take that off. You don't really see that. You have a search engine. That's great. But what we're trying to do is say, okay, well, what if we can translate, because we don't pay for Google, right? It's effectively free. If we can translate that to physical services, that's where things almost flip on their head. And it's like paradoxical. How can something be a rideshare company for free in an electric car, in a nice car, and the drivers are happy? How is this possible? I mean, this is paradoxical in a way, I think. And I think that's a core concept to some of the most pioneering companies, right? How can Apple be as successful as they are and have such high touch products, but they also have an assembly line that puts them all together? Tesla being super fast and very cool looking, but also all electric. That's kind of a paradox. So that's kind of how we think about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And from my perspective now, we're entering a new year, and in 2022 you guys had your two locations, Harrisburg and the Hershey area, and obviously Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania, Hershey, a very well-known area around the world for Hershey's chocolate. I kind of want to see what your breakout goals were for 2023 and where you want to see the business at the end of the year, and then what's your end goal of where you kind of want to see it go.
So 2023 is really about gaining market share in our current region. So we really want to get 51% or more of Harrisburg and Hershey. So we're raising a seed round right now that will hopefully allow us to have the majority market share. What we can do from there is then take that template to other markets. That's our scalability plan. And it's going to require a ton of work, and every market's going to be different. But I think we've chosen a fairly diverse and unique market to start. Hershey is unique, as you said, is a vacation destination for people around the world, and Harrisburg is highly diverse. It's the capital of Pennsylvania, but it's not a big city, so we have a little bit more leeway and the ability to pivot quickly to build out this template.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. And I was going to say, from a marketing perspective, how are you guys planning on shifting that dynamic from growing from not just a player in the region, but then a player to all of Pennsylvania? And then we can kind of get into larger scale a little bit later in the chat, but I'm just interested to see, because I, again, have used it and I've had nothing but good things to say about it. It was an awesome experience, and the best part was the ride was free. So I guess my idea is, we know it's a superior model now, but what is your plan to kind of get the idea out to a larger audience? Like how do you plan on expanding from the Harrisburg and the Hershey area to, say, where I go to school is Westchester? Like, if you wanted to get into the Westchester area, if you wanted to get into big cities like New York City, Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because our current milestones that we've hit have all been met by word of mouth. So we haven't paid any money outside of social media for advertising and marketing, which we're super proud of. And I think, again, going back to building that initial template, Andrew Chen has a book called The Cold Start Problem, and he was one of the original investors in Uber, and he has incredible insight into scalability models for rideshare, but many other things too. And that's a big part of that book, is a subject called the Atomic Network, which is building your initial network of users and scaling from there. So you're not spending, excess capital on advertising and marketing when you don't have a great product market fit yet. So as we're building the product and the service and making sure it's running properly, we want our best users. So people who are going to tell a friend or tell a colleague or tell someone on your campus, right? Like, these are friends who are going to even potentially give us a little bit of grace if things don't go perfectly, but at the same time, it's organic and it's obviously economical too. So I think to answer your question is, moving into this next phase, we are going to spend more money on marketing and advertising to get the word out. It helps our user base grow, but then it also helps with our hero base as well, and attracting more advertiser partners.
Yeah, okay. I like the response. That was really good, because I was going to say, going off of that now, let's say by 2025, you guys raised all the money you needed to. Everything is going well. You got the majority share in Pennsylvania, and now you move to diversify to multiple cities. Where do you see the company shifting to between 2025 and beyond? Do you plan on having some sort of acquisition? Do you want to keep growing it to bring the power back to the people and be able to let them seamlessly be able to travel wherever? What's your idea for the future of SweetRide?
I mean, I think it's so incredibly iterative. Like, tomorrow, everything could change. The way that I would like for things to continue is, we don't have any aspirations to just grow it and sell it. That's not how we're building it. That's not what we envision in the future. We want to, I think you hit the nail on the head. We want to keep it for the people. And markets will change. I think growth strategy will continue to change as, macro and microeconomic, shifts occur. But I think it's just kind of keeping your finger on the pulse of, like I said, every market's different. So what market may work for us, this quarter may be different next quarter. But I think it's trying to scale appropriately and pay attention to what the users need. And I think for the foreseeable future, just focusing on rideshare only, not food, item, or alcohol delivery at this time. But I think that's, another leg of the business that could really grow. And we, are excited about it, but we don't get too excited about it because we want to focus on being really, really good at rideshare. That's our thing.
Yeah, and that's awesome. But you did mention the food delivery. So I kind of want to touch base on that. I know, again, like you may not necessarily have an idea of how you would go about it, but how would the dynamic change? For example, if I were to order Chipotle or McDonald's and I was going to have SweetRide pick it up instead of Grubhub, DoorDash, any of those other food companies, have you guys thought into it yet about how you incorporate the SweetRide idea into delivery of food?
Yeah, I think it would be, fairly similar to how we run ads on the rideshare side, if that's what you are referring to. But, that's an interesting topic and we haven't gone too far into it. But, the way that we did in the past with our previous hero, the credit union, I mean, there's a very, very unique opportunity with food delivery when you have, a delivery driver coming to your home and handing you a bag of food with, say, a rate sheet or some type of promotion that is traceable or trackable.
That's a really good idea.
Which is what we did. And so we think that there is tremendous opportunity there, but we really, really want to be good at one thing first, and then we can adjust from there.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. That was a really good answer, because I was gonna say I didn't even think of the opportunity that you could be doing on-hand ad delivery when you're delivering food, for example. But
and also, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I think a big part and things that a way that we approached it before was, in that interaction where you're handed off your food, it's like, well, thank you for your your order. This was made possible by X.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
This was made possible by Home Depot. So rather than shopping at Lowe's, maybe you're gonna shop at Home Depot. It's kind of, you want to be differentiated. You want to have that last spark of, wow, they do really care. This was possible because of them. Sure, I'll shop there.
And I like the little tidbit to Home Depot there. So I guess my question off of that would be, is there some sort of dream sponsor that you would want to have on SweetRide, or is it kind of just like anybody who's willing to help the dream stay alive?
That's actually really, I've never thought of it. But if I had to come up with something quickly, I would, wow. Huh.
Maybe something like Porsche, or maybe a Rolex, or some big sponsor like that, or maybe a sports association. I think
it would have to be, honestly, whatever is best for the needs of the company.
That's a great answer. Yeah,
I really don't think it would be anything more than that. Whatever would keep the wheels on.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So this for me, I think, is really inspiring, because a lot of companies seem to prioritize how they can increase their capital, how they can increase their monetary gain. But again, it seems like the general theme that you've been putting out is bringing power back to the people to be able to experience rideshare and not have to pay for the experience. So it's a very inspiring thing to people, to me, for upcoming and rising entrepreneurs. So my question is, has there been anybody who's really influenced or inspired you to not necessarily start the entrepreneurial journey, but just be someone who's giving back, giving their time? Because one of the best quotes I've ever heard is, the best time that you have is the time that you give to others. So has there been anybody in your life who's been really inspiring on that accord?
I think inspiration comes from everywhere, and maybe that's part of kind of my musical side is when you write music, you find inspiration everywhere. Maybe a bird is singing outside, or you hear a chime, or a cadence of a washing machine. If you anything, I feel like I find inspiration from everywhere. I mean, there's so many people who are direct or maybe so many indirect mentors. I really look up to, as it relates to this, Jeff Weiner, who was one of the he was the CEO of LinkedIn for some time, who was founded by Reid Hoffman. That whole group of guys I really find super inspiring. They have a method of leadership which is considered compassionate management, which I think is really important. And I think it's, the analogy is, if you're hiking on a trail and you come across somebody with a massive boulder on top of them, empathy would be feeling the pain of the boulder. Compassion would be doing something about it, taking the boulder off of them. So we can all feel the pain, and we could say, when the restaurants close, it's like, man, that really sucks that they have no revenue. So they're staying open and still not making any profit. I mean, it's powerful stuff, and I think that's what led us to just jump in the cars and go out. And I think that's kind of what motivates us to keep doing what we're doing, to bring the power back to the people and be compassionate, because I will, certainly won't say them by name, but there are other companies in the rideshare industry that clearly aren't showing much compassion.
Yeah, because a big thing is, again, showing that capacity, or the compassion in the community, and giving back to the people. But going off the inspiration, I had a quick question about mentors. You'd mentioned mentors. Is there anybody who's really been fuel to your fire and making sure that they can help you with any other problems that you've seen with SweetRide thus far?
Yeah, I mean, not specifically one person, if I'm being honest, but I just personally have an awesome support system. Many friends. You're my friend. You and I will chat if I have a problem. But yeah, I think it's just a big part of being an entrepreneur is like not being afraid of asking for help or bouncing an idea off of somebody, or just not letting your ego get in the way. I mean, just have to. We're all learning.
Yeah.
I think that's where you want to be. Always a perpetual learner.
Yeah, that's a great answer, because I was gonna say, I feel like entrepreneurial process is like you're consistently learning, and you don't have to force yourself to be a continuous learner. It's just part of the process. You learn something new every single day, whether it could be something infinitesimally small or groundbreaking for the company. But exactly. I feel like, me personally, for the people who don't know, I've been developing a startup as well, and that's kind of how Chase and I got to meet each other. But in my everyday life, I feel a lot of adversity, and with the company, with life, and it just feels like every single day it's an up and down roller coaster. Yeah. So a quote that I used to always hear from my soccer coach when I was a kid was, "You can't control adversity, but you can control your response to it." So my question is, what's the greatest challenge of adversity you've faced with SweetRide thus far, and what was kind of the way you've overcome that adversity?
If you look at it on the timeline, it would appear that, it certainly hasn't been smooth sailing. But when we start, if you look at when SweetRide was started, our biggest adversity was certainly COVID, and that was many people's. Now, we, like I said, weren't as far along as we were, but that forced us, and how you deal with it is you pivot, right? And we pivoted into what we're doing now, and I don't know if those pivots will ever stop. That's a buzzword in entrepreneurship, right? But it's true though, and that next potentially forced pivot may push you in the direction where you were meant to go. So I think it's a big part of it is just not being afraid to make a promise and break it. I think that's a trait of a successful entrepreneur, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah. So again, going back to what we were talking about before, but the adversity, it's every entrepreneur faces adversity in their life. Every person faces adversity. They have their up and downs, but I feel like the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones who can kind of claw their way out of that pit, claw their way out of the darkest holes, and be able to overcome that adversity. So you had mentioned Jeff Weiner, but I was wondering if there was any specific successful entrepreneur in today's society that you could really compare yourself to and say that you thought you had personality like them, ideologies like them, or anything that you thought resonated with you as an individual.
Well, it's probably a hot topic, but I've been following the guy for many years now. I think I started watching his YouTube videos maybe 12 years ago, but a very polar kind of individual right now. But yeah, I mean, I would say Elon Musk is definitely the guy that I don't feel we're similar really in that way, but yeah, I think just the way that he approaches problems is probably what resonates most with me, is that he's not afraid to take on conventional thinking, and not to be contrarian, but it's like, hey, well, let's try it this way, and actually lean into it as hard as you can. Mm-hmm. I think it's the diehard mentality that I like. Mm-hmm. As an entrepreneur, you should be all in, and you should mean it. And I genuinely believe that most things he does, he really does mean, and so that's inspiring to me. And I do look up to him. Yeah,
I was gonna say I resonate a lot with Elon Musk as well, in the sense of I like his ideology. So a lot of people have questionable opinions, like you said with him, but
everything's based on physics, right? I mean, you're a scientist, and I think the idea of first principles is incredibly strong, because especially in business and startups and technology, taking an idea or a problem and boiling it down to its simple pieces, and then building them back up, rather than predicate thinking and predicate products. I think that's just a really interesting way to approach it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the same idea, it's like you're not going to be able to figure out anything unless you try. Like, again, bringing in lecture a little bit, talking about it, is you really don't know until you know, and you don't know unless you try it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like putting a bunch of balls in different baskets and then seeing which one fills up the fastest, or which one you can get the most out of it. But I was going to say, I definitely resonate with Elon Musk, and I was going to say, in addition to that, I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Hormozi. He's definitely prefaced on social media a lot in the last year or so. He did almost a podcast tour as well, and one of his beliefs is everybody seems very trustworthy, and they trust in people, but there's not always gonna be a best idea at heart from some other people. So one of the quotes he says is, "We question the beliefs of everyone except those we truly believe and those we never think to question." So it's finding great people in your life, like Chase. Like this is more of like I was telling him a little before the podcast, I look up to him a lot, and I'm proud to be able to call him my friend, in the sense of like he's doing something that is very cool, not just for himself from a monetary perspective, but for the community, and eventually hopefully people around the world. So it's awesome to be able to become part of a community of individuals, meeting great people like Chase, and eventually expanding our network to meet a lot of other entrepreneurs, like maybe one day Elon Musk, or we can both meet him. But Chase, it was really nice to have you on today, especially being episode 1. It's a pleasure. And again, with my experience with Sweet Ride, I've never had anything except great things to say, especially how comfy the Tesla was and how free the ride was. And one thing I will say is they came very quickly too. There was no wait, and the ad was pretty interesting too. And go get some bronze gold bunny. But I would definitely say check out Sweet Ride's app. And most of the people in this area are not going to be watching from somebody who's in his demographic, but I would still say check it out. Follow his social media. I'll link it in the description. And Chase, is there anything else that you wanted to say from a general perspective of, again, somebody who wants to break into the space of being an entrepreneur? Maybe they have the idea, but they don't know where to go with it, or they want to be entrepreneurial, but they don't know where to start, or any general advice that you want to kind of give out?
Well, first, it was an honor and a privilege to be on here. I appreciate it. I appreciate your friendship, and I appreciate what you're doing. So thank you for that, your friendship. I think, it's kind of one of those things where if you feel really compelled to do it, I think you should do it. Everyone's lives, people are they're all in different places in their lives. But there's really no best time to do it. So I think if you're passionate enough, if you do feel genuinely compelled to do it, I think it's worth trying. And if you can help people, I mean, that's even better. Yeah,
that's an awesome final message. And just to close out with the quote of the episode is just that persistence closes the distance, because you don't know where you can go until you try, and you do it as hard as you can. So again, thank you for being on here, Chase Kozlowski, founder and CEO of Sweet Rides, on officially episode 1 of Where Did I Start podcast.